Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Mindful Monday, where I have another card for you. We will talk about sort of the area that your child might be struggling with if you are experiencing this situation. We'll talk about some of the things to avoid, and then also how you can communicate with them in a way that shows them that you are there to support them, that helps them build their skills and ultimately move through that difficulty a little bit easier. So today's card is "Don't argue with me." Do you have a child that likes to argue? I know this has been an issue at various points in our house. And when I initially pulled this card, my first thought was, as you get into the teen years. But when I thought about it, it actually happens quite a bit when they're younger too. And really, in a lot of ways, this is it's a good sign. It's a sign of independence. Your children, developing their own opinions about things and whatnot. But it's a huge frustration, or it can be a huge frustration as a parent when you're just trying to get things done. Okay, so don't argue with me. What category does this fall under? If you have an idea, go ahead and pop it in the comments below. Do you think this is related more to stress, to a lack of skills, or to a need for support? I'd love to hear your thoughts. So I'll give you a second to pop that in the comments, and then I will talk to you about where I see this. So don't argue with me. I see that as falling under a need for support. So quite often when kids are feeling very disconnected, that shows up in them being very resistant to change. They're very rigid in sort of their schedules and in what they want. They're resistant to your limits. They refuse your help. Those kinds of things often pop up when they're feeling very disconnected and in need of some support. Which, the good news is, although the situation itself can be difficult, if you remember what it really is indicating, it becomes much easier to get back on track because it's all about reconnecting. Okay, so in this situation, if your child is arguing with you, here's what you want to avoid. And these are things, if you've done them, don't feel bad. I've been there too. And they will come back from time to time because progress, not perfect. You can't be a perfect parent all of the time. Neither can I. It's just not reality. So let go of the guilt. Let go of the blame, shame, judgment of yourself. And then we'll talk about what you can do next time. Okay, so things you want to avoid. Don't argue with me about this. Making demands of our kids in these situations, it's not helpful. It doesn't teach them anything. It certainly doesn't communicate our support for them. It's just not helpful. You also want to avoid blame. I've made my decision. Don't make me angry. While it's one thing to communicate how we're feeling, it's another thing to blame our child for how we're feeling. How we're feeling is perfectly fine and valid. However, it is not your child's fault. Okay, so there's a really important distinction there where, emotions are a normal part of the human experience. Whatever you feel is fine and valid and okay, but it is not the problem of somebody else. Okay, so we don't want to put those things on our kids. That's a lot of responsibility that they're not equipped to handle. You also want to avoid judgment. So you are being difficult. I already gave you my decision. I totally understand this one. However, judging them for their behavior does not help them move through it. Okay. I don't want to talk about this anymore. If you can't stop, you're going to your room. Again, we're missing a teachable moment if we're just shutting them down like that. So here's what you can do instead. So number one, like I say every week, you're going to stop and take a moment for yourself, take a deep breath, and just calm yourself. And then I want you to get curious. I've said this before, I'll say it again. Curiosity is the gateway to compassion. Okay, so you might say something like, "It sounds like you want to share your feelings about my decision. Is that right?" It's okay for them to have feelings. It's okay for them to have an opinion. It doesn't mean you have to change your decision, but their feelings are valid. And getting curious about what their feelings are really helps them to feel heard. So you want to acknowledge those feelings. You might say something like, "You're really upset, and you want me to know that you're very angry." That helps give them words that they can in the future use when they're upset. Okay. You want to validate their needs, and you can make a simple request. So, for example, you might say something like, "What you think is really important to me, and it would help me to focus if you could share it in a softer tone." So, all you're doing is asking them to speak to you in a way that you can hear it. When they're yelling at you, just like when you're yelling at them, it's really hard to hear what is actually being said. Now, if they're really upset in the moment, sometimes it can take a minute for them to get to a place where they can share it in a softer tone of voice. That requires the ability to regulate their emotions. And if your child is really young, that can be a bit of a challenge. So you might want to do a little bit more empathizing and co regulation first. But this is a reasonable request to make. "I really want to hear what you have to say, but I can't hear you when you're yelling. Can you try and use a softer voice?" You can also say, "I hear how difficult this is for you. I'm listening, and I have some ideas for you to help manage your feelings." This is where we get to this sort of building the skill of being able to communicate their emotions. But none of these steps involve you changing your decision. It's all about acknowledging their feelings. There's sort of a misconception quite often in conscious parenting where people feel like they can't have any limits. There's no discipline. The kids get to do whatever they want. And that's not the case. You have your decisions, you can set your limits, but your kids can also have their feelings about it. And you can have a really good discussion with them about what that can look like. And this is a really good, I know this sort of fell under the category of support, but it also leads into really important skills later on as they get older to be able to communicate with others when they're upset, when they disagree with something, in a way that their disagreement is heard rather than sort of ignored because the emotion takes over. Hopefully that makes sense for you. I hope you found this really helpful. If you have questions, please do pop them below. I hope you have a fabulous week, and I will see you again soon. Bye for now.